There, they see it.
Got it now.
Bruce, this is.
Uh-oh.
Henry, I think I inadvertently cut you off. Please unmute yourself if you can.
Bruce, there was an announcement today of building along Lake Cook in Milwaukee on the southeast corner for residential and commercial space. Do you think that will impact us in any way whatsoever?
Southeast corner of.
Yeah, it's a large area just near the between the Westin Hotel and Twin Peaks. It's on Lake Cook.
I don't see how that would affect us.
All right, they just approved it. That was why.
All right, then village ecologist is not here. Police report.
Am I unmuted? Can you turn yours down? Okay. The police activity is in the board packets. We continue to monitor activity in our region as far as looting and rioting. We do have extra people out tonight, including myself. We're not expecting anybody to come into Riverwoods, but there have been sightings and some incidents that have happened around us in Deerfield and Highland Park and Lake Forest. We're in close contact with those communities and all the other communities around us. And we'll continue to keep people apprised through our email system and through Facebook. I do have one officer with the mobile field force who has been all over the region the last couple of days, going where needed. And I have another person on the emergency service team who has been doing the same. That's all I have.
Any questions for the chief? Okay, moving along then, information item and comments. Obviously, the chief, I think, covered item 1 sufficiently. I think everyone is aware that on Friday, we in our region, along with all the other regions, moved into phase 3. That's for the executive order number 38. We're not opening the village hall completely yet. We have somebody here who's in the at-risk age, and their spouse has significant medical issues, so we're being a little more cautious. We're still making appointments if people wish to come in. We have plexiglass up in front of the front entry desk, and we have plexiglass up at the building department, as well as areas marked on the floor where people are supposed to stand. So we are in compliance with the CDC, DECIO, and the Illinois Department of Health, or Public Health, excuse me. And we do have 2 restaurants. Trustee Chamberlain has been working with them that have requested and have submitted plans. I think they're probably open by now for outside dining. You may recall that we do provide for outside dining license under our code. We have modified that. The last portion of it says they have to comply with all state, federal, and local law. So that all fits together anyway. They all have appropriate spacing. They all are using disposable utensils, and all of their service staff should be wearing personal protective equipment while they're serving. We will watch to try to make sure that they don't violate in any way, but at least they're making some effort to move forward with that. Finally, we talked a little bit at the last meeting, and we've had some issues as to the requirements of voting actions, or the supermajority requirements. You may remember I asked the attorney to provide us with a summary of which particular types of actions would require a supermajority. He has provided a memorandum and a at least partial list of those. Bruce, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Well, I think everyone just probably should take some time, not of course not now, but to go through them. I don't think, it sounds like it would be a rational thing to just say, well, let's have everything be consistent. I think as you look through those, you might start to have second guesses about whether, and that's probably a listing of half the number of actions are, whether it really makes sense to try and change all those relationships with one simple rule. That there's so much history behind all of those different provisions, and I'm not sure that you can think about whether you would want to apply one simple rule to each of those situations. Then we'd have to make sure that with each of those situations, our home rule authority really would allow us to do that. Or alternatively, you might just look at it and say, it's not sensible to try and carve one rule for all of this, and just pay attention to a few actions that you're interested in that you could address probably, more easily. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
How are you going to proceed on this, John?
Well, right now, it was a matter of information for the board. We did not have any specific motions or anything pending. It was a matter of trying to educate ourselves as to what's out there and what we might be required. If the board wants to take some action, we can start, but we're not in a position to take that tonight because it wasn't noticed for anything other than discussion and education. Cheryl,
I have a couple questions, yeah. If we wanted to, and I'm not saying that we do, could any or all of those be changed by a simple majority vote?
Well, I think the general principle is that if we're not preempted and if it pertains to a local governmental matter, then it would be in our authority. I think I couldn't look at each one of these and say, I've already determined that all those conditions are met. I think you'd have to look at each one and think about it.
Okay. And then my other question was, what's the difference between trustees holding office, like saying 2/3 of the trustees holding office versus 2/3 of the trustees?
It means that you have to not deal with 2/3 of trustees at a quorum, but 2/3 of trustees holding office means 2/3 of the total number of trustees, regardless of who shows up at a meeting.
Okay, and the 2/3 of trustees there who is present.
I think that's the difference.
Okay.
But it might also be, I would like to double check that, because it may also be that in some instances they just got sloppy in the drafting. When they say 2/3 of a particular category, and that's really the only, I'm looking at that in the zoning. Well, I'd like to look at that one example. Almost all of the others, it's pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why that there's that one exception. Again, that may just be for historical reasons.
John, maybe we can have a small committee, a couple of trustees, but certainly one who's got legal background, come up with a recommendation with their reasoning of how to approach this so that we have a basis to start rather than a free-for-all on 20 different examples. Have some way of approaching it logically.
Well, the problem we were trying to solve for is that we wanted to adjust the type of vote required on a couple of matters that were of high urgency for the village. My recommendation, just as a practical matter, is not to try and adjust voting requirements on 15 matters that have never come before you and are unlikely to come before you, just out of the sense that there ought to be one type of vote. I just think that for many reasons, that's just making your problem much more complicated than it was. What this illustrates is that supermajority votes are used often, and where they're used for various reasons, but they have a sort of an underlying thread, which you can see. Things that pertain to public policy questions of high urgency that require more than a simple majority, the disposition of property of assets of the village. And I think I think the point would be to try and take the context of why there are those decisions. And then with respect to the matters that you are most concerned with in terms of guiding village board actions that come before more often, to try and apply those principles in a way that you think would make sense.
Would it make any sense to adopt a policy or a rule rather that on those things that require extra majority, we want to change them? We couldn't change them unless we had votes that were called for in the extra majority vote rather than a simple majority?
You could do that, but I don't think it would bind a future board. And that's the general issue here, is that a future board can change that requirement, and I'm not sure that they adopted an ordinance repealing that ordinance. I don't know that they would have to have a different majority than.
Trying to be sensitive to, let's say we were going back to the conversation we had on privatizing streets that required a certain vote, and then to say that we could simply after the fact change that using a majority, simple majority, that changes the rules after the fact. And I think it's unfair to the people who expressed their opinion and voted a certain way the first time. So I think just calling a simple majority to change some of these extra majority votes really opens the door to pernicious behavior.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is I don't see a mechanism to bind a future board. So if it's a decision that you want to take for the duration of your terms, it wouldn't even prevent this board on another vote from changing. I mean, that's just the nature of things. That's why most of these, were put in place, remember, in the municipal code in a way that governs non-home rule communities. So there wasn't an expectation that people would adjust them, because they can't. And remember, many, many more communities in Illinois are non-home rule, as Riverwoods was, than our home rule. So when you look at ordinances of home rule communities, they have not, from my experience, gone through a wholesale change of all these voting requirements. The ones that they have most typically changed are the requirements for sale of property. And they've usually retained, like Evanston, just from memory, they've retained a supermajority, but what they've done is use their home rule powers to lessen some of the publication and appraisal and other requirements that they didn't think were needed. But in my experience, the home rule communities have not attempted to go through this exercise and change all the supermajority like this.
So
Michael?
I'm inclined to just take each one as it comes to us. I realize that we have had this come up recently in a short period of time more than once, but I still think that's unusual. And so I really think this is a case-by-case kind of situation.
Mr. Haber, been waiting patiently.
Yeah, my question to Bruce was going to be what he just expounded on, which was, how many other home rule communities have actually modified the state statute and changed the voting requirements? If you had done any kind of analysis on that, just out of curiosity.
I haven't, except in the context of sale of property, because a lot of communities, when they have property and they want to sell it, they don't want to go through publication for 3 weeks, consecutive weeks in the paper and things like that. They have other means for trying to ascertain value, and they'd rather rely on that than be, straitjacketed in that way. I know that's something I could do. I could look at just a couple of the larger communities around us. I mean, I frequently do look at their ordinances for various matters and see if I'm not aware of any kind of omnibus thing that says, no matter what, all the votes are going to be this. But I could check.
Okay, any other questions or comments? I've got to say, I'm reluctant to be changing these things very often. The types of things that the supermajorities are required for are things that I think having a broad majority and consensus is probably a good idea. So I'm reluctant to switch back to just a simple majority for a great number of these. Cheryl, did you have another comment or
Oh,
just?
no, sorry. I was looking for the raise hand feature, but I'm not seeing it.
Look under reactions down at the bottom. If you scroll down a little bit or run across the bottom menu, I think you'll see a reactions button. No? Okay. Any other comments or questions in relation to this? All right then, moving on to visitors wishing to address the board. First of all, I see one of our residents has sent us an email. It's Miss Allison Levine or Levin. I'm not sure which it is. Allison, I see you're down there. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it. She wrote, "Hello, I am a Riverwoods resident who is hearing the silence of Riverwoods officials on the murder of George Floyd and regarding racism and police violence in general. I want to know what Mayor Norris, the Board of Trustees, and the police department are doing now and planning to do in the future. How are you prioritizing and ensuring the safety of Black, Indigenous, and all other people of color in Riverwoods? What specific actions will you be taking?" Well, first of all, I don't think any of us should necessarily refer to the incident with Mr. Floyd in criminal terms. Granted, we're not the president or whatever, but it's generally considered bad form. Certainly all of us saw conduct that is grossly unacceptable by any measure that we know. And we hope that justice will be done in relation to the people directly involved and for Mr. Floyd's family. As regards racism, I think I can speak for the board. We uncategorically condemn it and will not tolerate it in any way. Now, your issue of police violence, all I can do is address the police that we have here. Our training and standards are such that it won't occur here, period. If we have any inkling of it, we wouldn't. Chief Dano, if you wish to address it when I'm done, certainly you may, but we don't tolerate it. It's just that simple. Undue force is unacceptable, period. As to what we are doing now in the future, I frankly think we as a village will continue to do what we have done, and I will not be prioritizing the safety of any of our citizens above any others. I have a duty to each and every citizen, whether Black, Indigenous, of color, Asian, to safeguard each and every one of you in your homes and in your business. And anything that would threaten anyone will not be tolerated here, period. I realize you may not agree with what I'm saying. You may perceive things a little differently, but all I can tell you is that it won't happen here, and we will do everything that we can to make sure, as I say, that everyone is safe in their homes. I'm afraid I'm one of those people that believes all lives matter. Chief, did you want to make any specific comments or as to how you maintain your force?
Well, I just want to assure everybody that my officers are well trained. We have extensive training in cultural diversity. We have extensive training in crisis intervention. We have a lot of training in how to diffuse a situation. I hired most of the officers myself, and I would not tolerate any kind of racial profiling or any kind of violation of anybody's rights. My officers know that, and my officers are all in agreement with me. I'm very confident that if we have any type of situation, that my officers will handle it appropriately.
Are there any of the trustees that would like to make comment here? Okay.
I would just say that.
Yes, Mr. Clayton.
I would just say that I think our policy with regard to discrimination is a.
Mike, we're not hearing. Oh, never mind. I know why.
You ready? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I guess is a village-wide policy. I think we go out of our way to make sure that we don't discriminate on the basis of hiring, promotion, work environment, harassment, and so on and so forth. So I think the village has a strong record with regard to that. And as long as I'm a trustee, they will continue to have that.
Yes, I mean, I will, if I have to be defending, I will. I'll point out that when I came on board, I immediately made sure everybody, including the trustees, went through various forms of training to avoid any of these issues. So again, we don't assume that everything's okay. We work to make sure that it is, and we do monitor and check. Anyone else? Okay, Allison, I hope that answers your question. If you'd like to call me tomorrow, I'll be more than happy to discuss it further with you. Also online, I see Patricia Anderson. I think all of you received Patricia's email last night. I'm in the process of preparing a more extensive response. So I don't know if anyone wishes to make a comment in relation to it this evening, but there will be a response to Ms. Anderson's, I think, very direct and straightforward email. Okay, hearing none, we'll move forward then to new business. First item of business is approval of submission of application for Rebuild Illinois grant for water main expansion and of retaining the services of ACS for grant application and administration. I think the first question is, are we willing to commit ourselves to spending $1 million if we can get $2 million from the state for these particular water projects? They're not necessarily urgent, but I'll let Pat speak in a moment. Certainly from a point of view of good engineering and maintaining our water system in the best way, I think it is something that we have to at least consider. We currently have $1.2 million in the water fund. Last year we had 1.1, so we have increased it slightly. We did do work in 2018 because at the end of 2017 we had $2.1 million in the water fund. But if you remember, I think we had about a $700,000 water project that was done. I believe our water reserve number is still $2 million. So with that, let me throw it over to Pat to explain why there are virtues to this project. Pat?
I guess I would start with, of course, the state rolled out this grant program, and like a lot of communities, Riverwoods asked the question, hey, what do we have on the books that we could put in an application for and try to take advantage of this? I think I shared with a lot of folks, if not all the board, it's a 50-page document of eligibility criteria, who's eligible, what sort of projects are eligible, the time frame that they have to get done. And after kind of kicking things around a bit, I landed on the water main looping for a couple of reasons. One, it's all in public right-of-way, so we don't need easements. There's a specific requirement in the grant application that the community has 100% of the right-of-way or easements needed for the project. So that made ineligible a lot of the other water main extensions through some of the private neighborhoods that we might have otherwise considered. And it's the type of work that we could get done in a reasonably short amount of time. There's a requirement that the project be operational in 24 months after award. It's certainly the amount of, that amount of work done in 2 years for certain. And then finally, I guess it is a project that if and when all the properties we pass were to connect, it comes pretty close to being equal to the amount of the proposed village share of the grant. So it just came out kind of clean that way, at least in my my estimation. So that's what went through the project selection, and then, you know, the benefits of looping water mains are pretty basic, and I lined them out and of course put them in the board memo. But you know, certainly it gives you more redundancy. If you have main breaks, you don't have to shut off water to as many people while you're making the repairs. It helps with firefighting. And then also you have some water quality benefits, and perhaps can get by with less hydrant flushing because you have more moving water in the mains with the varying.
I have a question.
Unmute me, Mr. Haber.
So when looking at the map, Pat, and if you extend it, if you were to extend that main north on Riverwoods Road, it's passing a fairly large section of Lincolnshire too, right?
That's correct.
And those homes that are in Lincolnshire, outside the village boundaries, are they now serviced by a water main?
Yes, they have Lincolnshire water mains. So Riverwoods Road through that section would be very similar along Duffy, from Riverwoods Road to that finger of Lincolnshire that jumps down to Duffy Lane. We have parallel mains there as well. Riverwoods runs on the south side of the road and Lincolnshire runs on the north side of the road.
Okay. And aren't there some people along Duffy who are actually getting water through Lincolnshire under an agreement that we have with Lincolnshire?
There are folks between Cherrywood and Duffy on Riverwoods Road. There are a handful. And then there are a couple houses, correct, just east of Riverwoods Road that get their water from Lincolnshire.
All right.
In those cases, the rule is the Riverwoods resident pays the the Riverwoods connection fee, and then the village remits to Lincolnshire their smaller connection fee, so that we don't lose the viability of future projects because, you know, individual homeowners are being serviced by Lincolnshire.
Would we require that though to go on to our main if we extended that main?
We have not.
Why? Just curious.
Actually, I don't think we have any place where a Lincolnshire customer has a Riverwoods main available. The ones just east of Riverwoods Road, our main ends at Rose Terrace and doesn't extend far enough west to get to them. So I don't think we've had one where we put in water main that would service them.
But now we would if we extended this, right?
That is correct.
So I wonder how many of those there are and how that impacts the finances of this, if at all.
There's I'd say 4.
That's it, just 4.
Correct.
So Rick, I think you were next, and then Henry.
Actually, Henry was next.
Oh, okay, then Henry. Sorry, thank you, Rick.
I spoke with Eric Goldstein earlier today, and he had a question, which I also have. We're adding about 12,000 lineal feet of water availability, if I'm reading this correctly. And the question was, although I don't know how the availability of access by the right-of-way will affect this, but did we make any evaluation as to who would now be available to get water versus the ones we chose or did not choose? I mean, what we're doing essentially is picking out a select number of residents that heretofore have not been able to get water, that we have now chosen to make that available. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just wondering, do these people want water, or are there areas that we may want to consider providing water, and how many of the people that we've laid out here actually will hook up? Do we don't have any survey of, once we provide it, are they going to hook up to it?
I'll jump in on that. The answer is no, other than, you know, we know, of course, we had a discussion a meeting or two ago about the section of Riverwoods Road between Studio and Saunders. Between the one gentleman with the crisis, I know there are a couple of relatively new homes there that in the past have inquired about water. But other than that, no, we don't have a sense for how many of these people would want to connect. These particular projects were chosen because they're all on public rights of way. So for instance, if I could really pick a project, I would complete right up the gut in the middle of town, up Woodland and Kennelwood, and make that connection right down the middle to get that backbone 12-inch main done. But we don't have any easements there. So it wasn't eligible for the grant program.
So these were the only available ones that made sense. We had an easement. Am I putting words in your mouth? I don't mean to, but is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we could run around, say, Indian Trails. That's a village street too, so I could add additional projects. But to my way of thinking, we were looping the system and making possible future extensions into those neighborhoods.
Okay.
Yeah, my understanding was that this was an improvement in the system, and if we pick up extra residents, so much the better. But this was for engineering reasons. Rick?
So my question was on the costs and the money that's in the water fund right now. I thought I heard somebody say that there's 1.2 million in the water fund, and this project would cost the village 1.15. So that means we'd have $50,000 left in the water fund. Am I doing the math right?
Yeah, I won't say it's exactly that, but pretty doggone close.
Okay. It seems like a very, very tight. And doesn't the water fund still owe the village like $700,000?
Probably. We're trying to confirm that. The last resolution that we had forgiving any of it, it was still $710,000.
Okay, it seems maybe we could lower the overall value. I mean, I think it's a great idea. I mean, it's as a matter of fact, I'd like to see a couple of other loops closed, but to Pat's point, they don't fall under the grant requirements, so you can't use them. But maybe we could eliminate something that we could make it a little smaller project so that there's still money left. I'm just nervous about using all the reserves for one project, even though it's over 2 years and we will be able to build it up. We're not going to be able to build it up to what it is now in 2 years.
We're building it up at a rate of about 60 or 80,000 a year right now.
So it's going to take
not that great. So
20 years to build it back. Whoa, a lot of hands.
Cheryl, you haven't spoken really on this yet, so let me get to you, then Mike, then we'll go back up to Henry.
Okay, so I don't know if we have an actual policy, but I think what we have told people is essentially you don't have to connect. And one of my concerns is if that is true, that we're going to do all this work, and while if everyone connects, that's great, we'll get our money back. If we don't know, however, if people are interested in municipal water, we may have very few people who want to connect, and we won't get the money back. I see the public benefit of this, but I think as Rick had mentioned, I think we're cutting it pretty close on the amount that we would be spending with no guarantees that we would get that money back anytime soon.
Well, I would agree that while some may sign up, I think we would be foolish to count on people signing up right away. That we need to just anticipate that we have to pay for it all ourselves. And if people do sign up and we get our money back, great. Mr. Haber, you're next, and then Henry.
John, can I just jump in for a second? I'm sorry to jump over Mike, but I think we've got some misinformation here. I think the water fund has $2.3 million in it. We've got $1.2 million in Chase and $1.1 million in investments.
That's why I asked the question, Mike.
That's what I thought also, and I was just going to go check that.
More than $2 million in that fund. That's why.
I think Mike is correct.
You're right, Mike. I picked up cash. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was picking up cash. I'd rather give you the smaller number and actually have it be bigger than the other way around, but
I
Mike,
apologize
thank
to
you.
trustee Haber.
No, no problem. My comment is that I think in the past, the board has had a policy. Now, obviously, we can change that policy anytime we want, but I think in the past, the board has had a policy that to extend the water system, there was some resident request for it, and that it really wasn't going to cost the village money. In other words, we weren't really advancing a significant amount of money to extend the water system. We wanted to be able to get enough people on board so that their connection fees would pay for the cost of that system. That's my recollection in the past.
I think,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I thought you were finished. I think we always wanted the people to sign up, so we got that portion. But one of the reasons that we think the water fund may still owe 700,000, and we'd forgiven close to $1 million in the past, is that with these funds, we only had people have to contribute what the tap-on fee was, and the village picked up the difference.
But my
That's why
recollection,
we have,
the difference was designed to be extremely small.
well, it wasn't always, but your basic premise is still there, that people wanted to ask for it, and we signed them up, and we at least got a core number from the residents.
I mean,
The only one that wasn't that way was we got a $600,000 grant from the state that we used to extend it further down Deerfield Road. But I think that was like a $600,000 project.
because
Again,
my
we didn't
recollection-
spend.
because my recollection was that we basically did it through special service areas.
Correct.
Okay, and this is somewhat of a departure from that, and I'm just
Yes.
wondering whether there would be some residents who would be upset by the fact that suddenly now we didn't follow that same protocol when there actually was an outcry by residents saying, I really need water, my well is bad, it's running dry, what can you do for me? And the only way we were willing to do that was by basically saying, pay up and we'll extend the water main.
Understood.
Now we're basically saying there's more of a policy that the village is going to extend it with the hope that people are going to sign on. Now that may be a good policy, and we may want to try and change the direction that we previously were following, but I just think we need to know the history of that for those people on the board who may not have that historical reference.
Cheryl, Henry would be next, but I would say, again, that's why I don't think we should count on people signing on to this. This is an improvement to the system for engineering reasons that I think are appropriate if we do it. But I don't think we should be counting on the recapture. Henry, and then I'll back to you, Cheryl.
Yeah, well, my question may have been answered with the increase from $1 to $2 million, which leaves enough in the fund for repairs and maintenance. And that was what I was going to ask, be concerned about. If you only have 50 grand in the fund and you have a water main break and it costs you 300,000 to repair it, where's that money come from? Does that come from the general fund? Did you go back and assess the people on water? But it sounds like you have $1 million in there for maintenance and repair.
What I thought we had was $2 million, and when I pulled this up this evening to try to have the exact figure, unfortunately, I don't know how to read a balance sheet, apparently.
Well, but I think that answers
remember.
my concern.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
I don't know how to do the hands thing. I'm sorry. Is there a place here I'm supposed to?
No, there isn't, it's not working. I mean, it's
All
not activated.
So what I would say is we got a supplemental grant from Discover, and we ran the Main Up Port Wine, and that was village funded, and we later knew that it would encourage and allow people to connect into our projects in that area. And we got the other grant that John mentioned and took us down Deerfield Road. Again, those didn't require anyone to join because they were fully funded. Here, I think for the board to consider is the fact that we're leveraging some resources that, by spending $1 million, we get $2 million back. And we haven't had that situation before. So if there is a reason to treat things differently, SSA 14 was the biggest water project. We spent much more than we got back in connections because we underestimated or overestimated. Many more people elected to stay on wells than could have been the case. And so there was a substantial deficit to complete the project that wasn't made up from, completely from the connections to reimburse the village for other costs it had. But none of those situations had an example where we were leveraging funds. And I think that, to me, that seems like a departure.
Cheryl?
Two things, they're really questions. The first one is, I understand right now, and this is really a question for Pat, I believe right now about 60% of our residents are in municipal water. And if we did this project, what percentage then would have access?
Well, I guess, 60% is probably not far off. And there was roughly 50 homes that would be directly serviced by this out of 1,200. So I'm never one to do math in my head.
It would be a relatively small increase. It wouldn't make a huge.
5%.
Okay, so it's really the looping that you're after here, rather than
That's-
adding big percentages. Yes?
I think that's the benefit, and that right now, because of the Rebuild Illinois money being available, we may be able to get a $3 million project done at a $1 million cost to us. So
So-
the real problem is, do you want to spend even that much right now?
Right. The other question I had to do with the likelihood of this going through and us actually this money, because I know that resident input is a part of it. I'm not it wasn't clear to me at what point this resident input occurs. Hopefully not before the June 30th
It does.
deadline. It's
Yeah,
after that?
No, it's before.
It's before then?
We need to hold a public hearing because we intend to spend local funds on it. The public hearing is necessary and has to be documented. That's part of the application requirements.
Yeah. So if that's the case, my other concern is that because we have to hold the public hearing and the resident input becomes a part of the packet, and it has to happen so quickly that it's going to be difficult to notify our residents that there is this opportunity and that we want their input. I don't know, I just have concerns about the short period of time trying to get valuable input.
Well, there's no question it's a short period of time. That's one reason why I'm going to need the boards to make a decision whether you want to even try for this grant or not. Both Pat and I preferred there would be more time, but you don't get an offer where they offer you 2 for 1 all that often.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure.
So I have one more related question, and that is, do we know anything, or Pat, have you talked to this consultant at all about the likelihood of us getting this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I've had a lot of conversations. The simple truth is, it's a competitive grant program. Funds are limited. You can imagine that there are other communities that have, truly shovel-ready projects. There are a number of elements where the grant reviewers might look more favorably on other projects. Is it already been budgeted? Are you, is this in your plan? Were you proposing to do this anyway and you just, don't have the funds to do it? So I do not want to paint a picture for the board that we're, have a leg up or a shoe-in or anything else that, we're more likely than not to get funded. This was my response to, hey, this program is available. What can we do? And then so the 2 recommendations I have is A, this type of project, and B, if you're going if the board decides to go after this grant, let's commit to going after it with the best application that we can put together. And that's why I reached out to ACS just because I'm not confident that my staff can fully digest, all 50 pages of all this information and really, help us put together a competitive application.
While I'm willing to take the risk of paying the money to the consultant, I want to be sure we really want to spend that much money on something that a month ago we knew we wanted to do but didn't feel quite so crucial. Mr. Haber?
For Pat. Pat, when I just kind of skimmed through this application, obviously it's lengthy, but it said that there's not a cost sharing requirement. So that's question number one. Why is there a cost sharing on this project? And then question number two is, have we given any thought to the path along Riverwoods Road as being a potential project? I know it says ADA compliant sidewalks or, walkways. Would that be a compliant project? Because that path is in bad shape, and it would link up to what Lincolnshire is now doing, which is redoing their entire path on Riverwoods Road. So, and that would be probably a lesser cost project. Just curious.
So there was a lot of similar questions going around as this project or this program was rolled out. And finally, the DCO came out and said, no, bike paths are not eligible. Sidewalks perhaps are a subset or something, different that perhaps we could inquire as to the eligibility. But the other part is they have to be what they call bondable projects. So for instance, roadway resurfacing programs were ineligible from the beginning. So my guess is that we would get a similar answer on, basically redoing our path that exists, that it's not a bondable project and ineligible.
Yeah, we looked at that one, Mike. As your other point, I forgot to bring that up. Thank you for bringing it up. We get more points the bigger our share is. And points count toward whether you get awarded or not. I think Pat's best evaluation was this way we're putting in a third instead of the normal half. We'd still get a fair number of points. So we'd have still a good chance. We could submit it, if I'm right, Pat, just asking for money, period. But the chances of our getting any without any skin in the game is probably not that great. But if the board wants to try that.
There's the letter of the grant scoring. I think the maximum points you can get is like 5 points if you're only asking for like 25%. And so there's not a huge point value to be gained with the local share. And DCO told me from the beginning that if you're not going to spend local money on it, you don't even have to have a public hearing about the project. My suggestion for a local share comes more from ACS's advice that just in their experience, applicants who show a willingness to, for lack of a better term, have some skin in the game tend to score better. But it's not a huge number of points to have any local participation at all.
So Rick, did you want to say something? Unmute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think it is an important project. I mean, I think looping these sections together is important. And now that there's more money in the water fund, I'm more comfortable with it. But I'm a little nervous along Trustee Chamberlain's concerns about getting all of the input that needs to be gotten from, and I'm not sure what public they're talking about. Are they talking about everybody in town, or are they talking about the people that might be affected by this main? I'm assuming it's everybody in town. And how do you hold a public meeting on Zoom?
We actually have one scheduled before the next board meeting for the SSA. So
I know,
it's
but
still awkward in any event, Rick. I do agree with you.
Or, I mean, that SSA is probably not a contentious issue as this might be, spending $1 million.
No argument. I agree with you that it wouldn't be easy. I mean, look at tonight. We have two people that current rules are not really allowing to talk in here. Plus, we'd probably cut each other off anyway. So I agree with you that is an issue.
Yeah, I mean, given the short time frame, I think it might be something we would want to pass on, but that's.
Trustee Hollander?
I want to verify that no general fund monies would be part of this project now or in the future. Is that correct?
Well, only if you guys voted it in. My thought would be, and I believe it should only be water fund money, because that is a enterprise fund, which is supposed to be self-supporting. I don't believe it would be right to have half of the village paying for improvements to water for the other parts of the village necessarily. If we all get on water, then fine, that's appropriate. But otherwise, it shouldn't be an improvement to a particular system coming out of the general fund.
And my second question is, they say as an eligible use is the water tower maintenance and painting, which I think we just let out a contract for. Is that something we might be interested in?
It's too small.
Okay.
The minimum project or grant awards $500,000.
And I think, Henry, that might have been water towers that actually worked as water towers, not as cell phone towers. Mr. Clayton.
If we're doing this project for engineering reasons, I'd like to ask Pat a few.
Mike, you just turned yourself off.
I'm sorry, I was not pressing the thing. Sorry. Just to understand a little more about the engineering rationale here. There's 3 things that were listed as desirable. Have we experienced any of these things? Are any of these things high probability? Have we? What is the sense that you have that we might run into one of these problems over the lifetime of the system?
Well, we certainly don't have a lot of breaks. They don't happen very. So right now, knock on wood, the redundancy part of it's not a huge issue for us. There is, the fire department would never say that we have a problem, and the flow testing we've done, we've gotten pretty good flows throughout the system. So it's from my perspective, the water quality is probably the biggest factor. But again, I don't want to paint a picture that these are somehow critical from an engineering perspective. It's just in every circumstance, the engineers would prefer to loop a main than to have long dead ends.
If we were designing it from the beginning for, say, a subdivision, you'd have the loops, but we're not there, and it's a big cost.
When would,
It'll be DMI. Go ahead, Bruce.
Oh, okay. If we got the grant, we have about 2 years or something to get stuff in operation. The likelihood is that it would be the next summer that we would do the work, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, there's 9 months to a year's worth of design and permitting.
So for a project of this size, I'm wondering if there would be an opportunity, if we were doing it, to coordinate with some of the other areas in the village. One of the issues when you try and go into South Riverwoods or someplace else is getting a contract price. You're just doing a smaller project. What do you think would be the potential to capture an economy of scale? If we told everyone it wouldn't really matter, 2 different areas of the village, different type of project?
12,000 feet of water main carries its own economy of scale. A $3.5 million project is going to be plenty attractive, that it'll get a lot of attention.
Well, what I'm saying is, would they then, as an alternate, add on to that project to include other? In other words, could we capture pricing for that would redound to the benefit of the other areas?
Yeah, I mean, definitely if we started, say, meeting with folks and we found an area that had an interest, it would have to be designed and permitted pretty much concurrently.
Well, that's what I'm asking. You have about a year. So if the board did this, if we went to other areas and said, we have a huge project coming up, this is a wonderful opportunity for us to include this project as an alternate, even if it's an SSA, does that make sense? Would that be a value?
I've got to say my experience is that nobody wants to pay anything like a tap-on fee for water unless their water is bad, because they figure they're buying $25,000 worth of no improvement. They already had good water.
I'll go against you there, John.
Okay.
I know that there's
Mike,
people.
we'll get to you yet. Sorry.
Sorry, Mike.
Go ahead, Rick. You've got it right now.
I know that there's people in South River Woods, in Vernon Woods in particular, that are interested in water, and if they could get it via an SSA. I mean, we're supposed to have 2 meetings with the village, and we didn't get to do that because the virus happened. So it's a possibility. I'm not guaranteeing anything. I don't know how many people really want it, but it could be there.
Trustee Haber.
So I think, given the practical difficulties of having the public hearing, in such a short time frame, and given the size of the project and the $1 million that we're going to be potentially spending, I'm a bit reluctant to move forward with it. However, I think the question that we can be asking ourselves tonight is whether we want to invest $10,000 into a grant application that provides for no cost sharing for the same project and not need the public hearing. Is that a risk that, would we want to risk 10,000 to potentially get 3 million and without there being any cost sharing? I think that's an interesting question that we should be exploring.
Well, that is an interesting point. And sometimes being turned down for grants gets you a little farther up the list for one in the future. Pat, you've got the most feeling on this. Just what chance do you think we would have if we didn't have skin in the game?
Well, again, I looked it up actually. So it is a fact that there's only 5 points to be lost for having no funding. So it's not from a purely scorekeeping perspective. It's not bad. And then in my discussions with ACS, he told me that typically these grant programs, they like to sprinkle it around to a lot of different communities. And in this particular case, the sense he has is they're looking for big projects to fund. So, from that perspective, I don't think that, whether it's a $2 million ask or a $3.5 million ask necessarily hurts us. It's just going to be what perception perhaps, because there's all sorts of numerical scoring and we can read that and we can come up with what our score is, but I think there's also there's a lot of wiggle room in that scoring, and what we don't know is just kind of the general attitude, if you will, of the people that are scoring it. So I don't think that it's an absolute necessity that there be a local share to the project.
But does the local share have to be, to Mike's point, if no local share maybe gets us rid of an intangible, but what if the local share was 250,000? Maybe we wouldn't feel quite as crazy about having a rushed hearing.
Then you need the public hearing, though.
I know, but
Yeah.
it's.
See,
I don't know how you feel about that. It's not $1 million.
well, but is it enough? None of us know. That's the whole point. And if we're not going to go at a number that we think puts us closer to it, I'm more leaning toward Trustee Haber's suggestion of just go with the 10, get the best grant we can, and perhaps go in that direction, no public hearing, and God, maybe we'll get lucky and they'll fund it all for us. Mr. Clayton.
With that in mind, I would like to move that we retain the services of administrative consulting in order to pursue a grant for $3,651,250 as a Rebuild Illinois grant for our water project.
I'll second that.
But God, you two together in one night. Last week it was Cheryl and Mike. Now I don't know if we're going to live through this. Any further discussion? Hearing none, a roll call, please.
Trustee Chamberlain.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein. Trustee Haber.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Okay, well, we will then retain their services. Ooh, we are really echoing through somewhere. We'll retain the services and hopefully we can come up with 3 million. That'll be better than getting 2 million.
May I just ask a question? Point of order? Oh, never mind. Sorry.
No, okay. All right then, moving on to the next agenda item is resolution approving intergovernmental agreement among the members agencies of the Major Crash Assistance Team. As I noted, this doesn't add any obligation to us as far as personnel or funding. It's just memorializing the actual sharing of officers for crash investigations. Chief, you have any comments that you want to add?
I think you pretty much summed it up.
You're muted, Bruce.
I think you pretty much summed it up. There's no expenditure required here. They're just updating the intergovernmental agreement. In addition to major crash assistance, they're also offering drug recognition experts and a drone response with an operator in the drone.
Are there any
I'll move-
questions?
I'll
Yes,
move.
Mr. Haber.
I move that we adopt the resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement among the members of the Lake County.
Mike Haber, did you want to say something? Because I'm not hearing.
He's talking.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's my fault. My fault, Mike.
Okay, I was just moving that we
There we
adopt that resolution.
Okay.
Approving the
Second.
I've got to turn mine off so we don't echo the chief over here. As I said, that we are not the most technically advanced here. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying
I think we need a roll call vote.
that was if the act had passed, but on the advice of council, we'll have a roll call vote.
Trustee Chamberlain.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein. Trustee Haber.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Resolution 200605.
Just so that you all know what council brought up under Senate Bill 2135, while it does allow for a more relaxed attendance with electronic attendance, all votes are supposed to be roll call votes. So on the assumption that it might have been signed this morning and nobody bothered to tell us, although I did check just before the meeting, that was probably wise. Moving on then, there is no old business. Standing committee reports. Trustee Haber?
I don't have anything.
Trustee Chamberlain?
I have a lot of things. I will let Trustee Clayton, if he wishes to talk a little bit more about the Finance Committee meeting and what we talked about. But one of the things that we did talk about and that I have called all of our Riverwoods businesses to find out how they're doing and what, if anything, we can do to help them. And as a result of that, we have King Shabu Shabu and Kogi Kogi are going to have outdoor seating. We have a plan that we've approved, and they should be setting up pretty soon, so that's great. Most of the businesses said they weren't really sure what would be helpful, but that they did really appreciate the call, so that was good. And of course, we talked about another program as well, but that hasn't been finalized. The branding and education meeting will be this Friday, and what we're really going to do is look at different ways we can go about achieving our purpose, giving the completely new environment that we are in. If you haven't been to the community garden, you should, because all of the plots have little plants in them, and it looks pretty fabulous. And then last but not least, work is being done on the sign that we voted on. The electronic sign was ordered, and then of course we had this COVID situation, and then everything shut down for a while. But we may see demolition of our old sign or current sign at Riverwoods and Deerfield as soon as June 8th. And we'll have some banners up there for the final location and placement. Fabrication of the sign will take about 8 weeks, and then once the main sign goes up, then we will do the village hall signs and the entrance signs. So overall, what the sign company had told us was about 90 days. So we're pretty much back on schedule, I think.
Okay. Any questions?
Unless people have questions.
I just have a comment, and I'm not advocating this, but I just want to tell everyone I saw this, and that is I was driving through Harwood Heights, and they have an electronic sign when you enter the village. I think it was Harwood Heights. It was either Harwood Heights or Norwich. And I noticed that on that sign, they had like rotating, basically advertisements for local businesses that are in the community. And I suspect that it's a revenue generator. I suspect that they're charging the local businesses some monthly amount to be on that banner. Food for thought. I'm not sure I'm even in favor of it, to be honest with you. It's very commercial, but it's just something that I noticed that I would bring to the attention to the
I think it's a good idea. I was thinking myself about that, but I think the board talked about it, and the last time around, I'm not sure that we had as many for as against, but again, let's see how it works. I think our businesses could use it, whether we're making money off of it or not right now.
Yeah, the committee briefly discussed that, and our thinking was that once we get the sign operational, what we'll do is try using the sign in different ways and then get to that kind of a discussion.
That makes sense. I knew that we discussed it someplace. Okay, Trustee Jamerson.
So the building report is included in the packet. It's 2 months long. I don't have year-to-date figures on this, but we did have a little over $2 million worth of construction value in April and May. The report is coming along, and hopefully now we'll have some totals at the bottom, but given the changes in the building department, and they wanted to make sure that this is correct. So I believe this is probably the most correct report we've had in a while. So.
Well, that's moving forward. There was a very good interview today, so we'll see where that's going. Trustee Goldstein is not here. I can tell you on the technology front, we are talking with the website developer about having 8 of our forms be fillable. That's something we've gotten multiple requests from during the last 2 months. As you might imagine, it was a goal anyway, and I think that will add to the benefit derived from our website. Trustee Hollander?
No report.
Trustee Clayton?
Just to say that our retail grant support program has been stymied a little bit by lack of access for me to the sales tax data. So we're going to try to work through that and see if there's anything we can put together.
So, and again, I appreciate, everyone should appreciate the work Trustee Clayton has done, because he's put together what I think may be a very reasonable formula that hopefully we'll all think works. I know of no reason to go into it. Oh, yes, Mr. Haber.
There's one other comment that I was reading. I don't know where I came across it on the internet or something. Property just south of the public storage unit is now being marketed.
Yes, where the old gazebo was, et cetera. They've approached us again about, so we are in discussions with them. I'm not sure exactly where we are at this moment. It's kind of on back and forth. Bruce, when was the last time you heard?
A couple of weeks ago, the gentleman called, he'd been referred to me, and he had plans for probably 6 different uses on the site. And I suggested that he talk with the civil engineer.
So hopefully we may yet be getting something out of that, but as we all know, you get about 8 conversations before you start to get something that goes as far as you'd like. So
I do believe that trustee Hollander and I have volunteered to talk with this person.
Yes, and we will certainly take advantage of that if we can get to a point where there's really something for you to talk about. I understand what you're saying, but so far it's kind of a nibble to ask what kind of services are available and what's the village thinking. So it hasn't reached a point where I think necessarily you'd want to.
I do remember one request he had was to have a semi-commercial bee operation. He trucks bees around, so he would have, I don't know what size of an operation that would be over there.
That would be at least a flatbed. From those of us who've been in farm country, you see those still moving around.
That would be one thing. But
Rick, you're making faces. You don't think so?
This isn't really the right location to overwinter bees.
I wouldn't think so, but
south. But
Snow bees.
Is this the same group, the husband and wife who met with us about a year ago, who wanted to sell because he was older?
I think they were talking to somebody about selling in another developer, Henry. So,
all right,
we're looking at, as long as it's not roosters, we're probably okay. That's a private joke between the chief, trustee Chamberlain, and myself, I think. Yes, Mike.
I have one other comment, and that is just because I've been doing a lot of walking, because of the pandemic, and I've been going along the path on Deerfield Road between Port Wine and Sanders. It is in deplorable condition.
Okay.
I mean, just deplorable condition. And I don't know whether we want to address it. I think we have an obligation to address it. I understand that, we're trying to wait it out because Deerfield Road's going to be expanded. But in the meantime,
we can't ignore it, Mike. I agree.
To go walk down that path, tell me whether or not that's something that we are proud of in the village.
I agree.
So I hear you, Pat. If you'll take a look at that again and give us a review and an idea of what we can, if anything, do.
So we can 100%. Basically, I mean, at this stage, I would put in my mind identical to what Lincolnshire is doing along Riverwoods Road. I mean, there's nothing there to salvage. So it will not be a small spend.
Pat, why don't you take a look at it and tell me what it is, and then we can report to the board.
Yeah, I'll put together some general estimates, and if the board wants to proceed with that, then we will.
Okay. As I started to say, I'm not aware of a reason to go into executive session. I almost hesitate to add, since everybody's been adding things for the good of the order, anything else. If not, our next meeting is June 16th, 2020 at 7:30. We will still only be in phase 3, so I assume we will still have to meet electronically on that date. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? And I'll run the risk of not taking a roll call on that one.
That's okay.
Everybody have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
And Pat, I will try to talk to you tomorrow.